All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to day one NBA DFS. It was hard for me to go to sleep last night because I was too excited. Keg, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. It's like Christmas morning, for all us DFS
It
guys that,
is.
that love NBA, man. You wake up and it's fantastic. Every year they put this two gamer out just to mess with you and just to tease you a little bit before, tomorrow's really good slate. But having this two gamer, man, it's a blessing. I'm excited about it.
See, some of you guys hate these two gamers. For me, it just gets the blood pumping a little bit. And I think Upper said something really good. He was like, I like these small game slates, so I get used to getting hurt again. And it
Right.
was like,
Well, I
yeah,
think we should talk about that before we even get into the slate,
yeah.
um in terms of you see a lot of people either complain about the two game slate or oh, I hate them. Well, you should find out what kind of player you are, and then on top of it, last year I remember we had conversations that we would go you know pretty in depth of what slates work for us. Like, we loved
Mm-hmm.
MMEing those 5 to 8 game slates or five to
Love
six game
those.
slates. Those are like the sweet spot ones. And then those bigger slates where you have like 10 to 12 game slates, we were like, hey, those are more build 3 lineups or more cash style, or that awesome contest they have, where it's like the 4 max 200 or 250.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just adjust your game style, because we talked about it. It's like when I went and looked back and looked at what I was doing, I was crushing all those 6 to 8 game slates and smaller in MME, but the bigger ones, for whatever reason, I just they just kill it. They were just sucking me up. Even though that we play, it's like I still play the same way.
Yeah.
It's just there's way more options to have out there, and if you don't get them right, you're just going to get crushed. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know how are you going to attack it this year, but I've kind of made it a point. I'm almost going to put a sticky note and be like, hey, don't be MMEing those big slates and focus on
Yeah,
a few lineups.
and I think it is because like we have the smaller pool and guys like you and me, like we're able to dig deeper into the data. We understand what to look for in these smaller slates. And I think when you add like 3 to 8, you can get different in just enough slots, where it's slightly easier to take down a tournament. Whereas when you have a super small slate, like a 2 gamer or a 1 gamer, or the opposite end of it, like a 12 gamer, that's when you start getting too many options and you start missing some of those people who go off. So I think
Right.
that's why I kind of like the smaller slates. They're just a little bit more fun for me, but that's my philosophy on it. I knew you kind of came on board with the smaller game slates last year, but I didn't know you were super on board with it like the way I've been. Like I've been a small slate homer for a while.
Yeah, I've liked those. I mean, I think I went back and what I like about doing this is I think we play similar styles,
Yeah.
but maybe a little bit different in some aspects. But I think because we play similar styles, we've been lucky enough to actually win, the 100 grand tournament, which has been awesome. And hopefully we can hit a couple of those this year again. And the reason I bring that up is just if you guys have played NFL or MLB, it's like any DFS sport, you have to take a stand. And I
Hmm.
want to preach this enough. Don't try to play everybody, man. Even on a 2 game slate like this, you're gonna get. Don't try to play everybody. If we'll get into it when we talk about some of these players, but you know fade. Maybe you want to fade Steph Curry 100% because the news or whatever is getting you off that with what Steve Kerr is, and you're like, I don't want to play Curry, and I'm going to go heavier on Embiid or Tatum, whatever it is. Take a stand on those things because it allows you to build way more lineups, and if those guys aren't the nuts, it's going to give you way more options to climb to the top. And trying to play 30 to 40% of everybody, you're not going to make money like that long term, because you're just, I mean, on these, because they're so top heavy, you are trying to
Hmm.
hit the nuts a few times a year, and it will just you'll crush. But if you're just trying to spread everything out, you're just going to be trickling losing money all the time. And I would rather lose, I'd rather take a stand and lose 60 or 70% that night than the next night come back and I'm right, and then you take down everything.
Yeah,
You're
and
just
and that's yeah, like you're exactly right, and that's what it comes down to. Like you said, we both won more than 6 figures at this point. Definitely when it comes to NBA and other sports, and the thing that people and even I still struggle with sometimes too is we're going to miss sometimes. We're going to miss a lot. And like you said, like that 60 to 70% of the time, you have to be okay with missing out because you took a stand.
Yep.
It's like, hey, I'm going to fade the most popular person today. I'm comfortable with that. I'm going to take that risk. And or, oh, this is the chalk play today. I really like this chalk play today. We're going to lock him in 90% or above.
Yep.
Like, you have to take those kind of risks. And every time I've won, it's been because of something like that.
100%. And then
sometimes even like a 40% on like a 5% owned guy or a 2% owned guy.
Yep. And it is. It doesn't matter if the guy is chalk or not chalk. You're just seeing him, being in the optimal. And you'll see a lot of people, especially in the little bit bigger slates, you'll be like, well, what about this guy? My thought is, if I cannot see him being in the optimal lineup and putting up, even if he's a cheap guy, putting up 30, DraftKings points or whatever it may be, I don't want him in my player pool. I'm not looking for 10, Now, if you're playing, the 888 and the very, high buy-in stuff where you're building a few lineups, that's different. But if you're talking about the massive, tournaments like tonight, it was a two, I don't know how he's in that $5 on DraftKings or in FanDuel. I mean, just massive. You have to take stands if you're going to take that down. You just have to. And you're probably going to chop it with some people, but if you're going to get different and get up there, you have to do it. So I just wanted to preface, what we're talking about with that, because I don't think it gets ingrained in people. And like you said, we all struggle with it to a point because it's not comfortable, but it shouldn't be comfortable when you're doing it. Like if you feel great about your lineups, you probably are not going to have a great night, at least in terms of, winning a tournament.
Mm-hmm. Very true. And okay, I know we haven't talked about this a ton yet, but I definitely do want to start getting into today's slate. I want to see which way you thought was going to be the best way to just kind of like view it from like a viewer's standpoint. We can look at the domination station. We can pull up the chalkboard, research station. Do you have a preference there? It's okay if you don't. I threw this at you. A lot of pressure.
What I generally do the first time, I mean, when I look at the slate or anything, I generally just pull up the domination station and I will run it raw to kind of see what it's giving me. That way I just kind of, it's generally going to push a lot of chalk out at you, but I can just kind of see what it's going to give me. And then from then I'm kind of like, okay, those guys I'm definitely going to be on. Those guys I don't feel comfortable on. If they're pushing a certain percentage, maybe that's where you're looking at your fades and whatnot. And so you're like, that's the first thing I do. Then go back and start looking at all the cheat sheets that we have out there and kind of feeling out, like we have the leverage that, for FanDuel and DraftKings that we both do and kind of see if there's somebody that we're leveraging the field on, and we're trying to find that. We're trying to help you get that leverage. So, I start with that. I mean, I don't use a chalkboard too much because I just use everything in the DS in terms of, ownership. But I generally just start with the DS and run it raw because you have a lot of people out there that still just push the buttons and hopefully they're going to win. And it doesn't matter what the projections can be. You still have to manipulate it because you have to look for guys and adjust the projection to what you think their ceiling is going to be.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing when it comes to NBA DFS in particular that I think has worked well for me is realizing that you can't just click the button. Like you have to do something different to make your own lineup stand out, but B, just find a way to win. Like you want to have your own impact on it. Like my ego is high enough where I'm like, I'm not gonna allow just like this one piece of technology. I want to make sure that I'm leaving an imprint on it. And so I'm not going to run the DS on the public show. I feel like that's us giving away a little bit too much information. But I will utilize the DS just so everyone can see it and we can kind of break down and look at names this way as well. Maybe on our pre-lock show that will be later today at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, we can run the DS a little bit and run through some questions and strategy. So definitely tune in for that a little bit later. Father of three, I wish I had no ego. If only, man. I think all of us have to have a little bit of one. If you continue to play DFS and convince yourself you're the top at whatever it is you do.
Yeah, whatever you do, I think you have to have. I mean, if you don't believe that you can take down those tournaments and believe what you're doing, then you're going to struggle at whatever you're doing.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's start off with game one. We have the 76ers versus the Celtics. This is an interesting game. This is a potential playoff game. I think Joel Embiid is the guy that everyone goes to here, and I think he's probably the stud of the slate. What do you think, Keg?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, I think it helps his rebounding numbers a lot, not having, Bob out there because he's going to be out for a while. But, big old Time Lord. I know it irritates some people call him that, but I'm sorry. It's one of the coolest damn nicknames out there. So not having him out there, they just don't have the size for him, right? I mean, Al Horford is Al Horford, right? He's going to have to be out there a ton without Bob because they bring Grant Williams in and they just don't have the size to compete with him, like for someone like that. Yeah, they brought in old man Blake Griffin. They ain't gonna do nothing for you. I think it's just those guys are really gonna do nothing for you on that Boston side. So, yeah, I mean, if I'm picking one stud to kind of build around, I think it's definitely him. And it's the pricing so soft, you can do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, that's the great part about NBA DFS is that at the start of the season, pricing just is so soft every year that you can really take advantage of it. But the con side of it is that it allows pretty much everyone to do whatever they want to do. So pretty much everyone's able to play Joel Embiid and have like a nice, relatively balanced lineup without having to force it in too many turds. So I agree with you. Long story short, it's just that Celtics really don't have anyone that can stop Joel Embiid today. So hopefully he goes off for us. Outside of that, on the Sixers in particular, I've seen a few names kind of come up a lot. I think Maxey's going to be super popular today. I think he's gotten a ton of off-season press and buzz. Everyone's starting to really lean that way. And then Tobias Harris, I think, is also the other option. And I think both are really good plays. When it comes to the Sixers, these are the guys I feel relatively confident about. And this is kind of where I want like the core pieces that I'm expecting the most points to come from. It's coming from the Sixers and the Celtics as well. But what about the other pieces on this when it comes to the Sixers? What are your thoughts about it, Keg?
Well, I think the big thing for the Sixers that are going to help those guys that you mentioned is just the move that PJ Tucker came over to this team.
See, I thought we were going to wait a little bit to get to PJ Tucker. That PJ Tucker's the guy that no one wants to play, that everyone hates to play because he burns us every time. But his name's starting to get a little bit more popular today.
Not that I play him, but but my thought is not so much to play him in DFS, but the reason I bring him up is he is there for defensive reasonings. He is completely there to try to lock down as much as he can Tatum, and he's going to be chasing him everywhere. And his only offensive production is that corner three. That's all he does. He's going to sit there on offense. But what that does is it opens up as he's sitting on the three. It opens up the lane for Maxey to drive. It opens up the lane for Tatum to drive. And that helps those guys offensively because PJ Tucker is not creating his own shot. PJ Tucker on offense is going to be sitting in that damn corner and playing defense. And that's all he's going to do. So it's one of those things where you want a little bit of him in DFS wise if he hits those threes, but I think he's going to be so focused on trying to slow down, those Boston guys that I think that's why, like the guys you mentioned before, and Harrison Maxey are just going to get even more usage on the offensive end, I guess is the best way to put it. It's just like he is not a part of that at all.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think PJ Tucker, thankfully, he's cheaper than he was last year as well. So we don't need him to do as much. We know exactly what he's going to do. Like you said, he's just going to run back and forth, play really good defense, stand in the corner on offense, and once in a blue moon, hit a few. And we have to hope that's enough. He's cheap enough where I think it makes sense to play him. We don't have to fade him. I think a potential slightly sneaky play on this team, but one I have absolutely zero faith in, is James Harden, 24% ownership as of right now. Just a little bit low for the upside that we've seen him have in the past. We have not seen that upside in a hell of a long time, though. So the likelihood of that happening and that he performs well is not as high, especially with Maxey starting to take more usage. And definitely if Tobias starts to take up a little bit more usage, There's just not enough mouths to feed on this team. But just being a smaller slate, trying to find like lower ownership, high upside, Harden's a guy that does kind of fit into that mold a little bit.
I think one thing
you hate him. I know you do.
No, it's like we saw it last year a lot with him in terms of, we had the aggressive Harden at times where he really pushed the score of the ball. And then we saw the Harden when the team kind of struggled a little bit when he was more just looking to pass and get everybody else involved. Which Harden are we going to see today? If we're going to see the guy that's just going to facilitate and run the offense and not be aggressive, I want 0% of Harden.
Yeah.
If we're going to see the guy that's going to be super aggressive, try to get to the line and make a stamp on the team, I want a lot of Harden, but then I don't want hardly any Harris or Maxey because he's just going to try to take over the game. So I guess I would look at it in that aspect. You just never know. It seems like with him and what he's going to do. But yeah, it's a tough read. And again, I mean, you got the Sixers. It's the tough thing with them is, with Boston. It's a good defensive team, right? And so they're number one last year in the league in assists allowed. So they can lock up Harden and get after him. It's not like he's getting any younger. So yeah, I think that's why we talked about Embiid. I mean, they just don't have anyone down there that can control him. And if we're going to decide between the two, I'd rather shove all my chips on him and not towards Harden.
Yeah, I agree. What are your thoughts when it comes to the Celtics? I mean, I think there's quite a few ways of looking at it. Like there's Tatum, who's definitely the guy you think about as being like their offensive powerhouse 9 times out of 10. Jaylen Brown, we know he can get it going and get hot. Those are like the two main priorities I have when it comes to like superstars. Outside of that, I know we have a lot of ownership on Al Horford right now. I have some thoughts on that play. And then the guard position really gets a little bit more clustered as well. What are your thoughts on the Boston Celtics this week or today?
This team's tough.
It's tough
because with Malcolm Brogdon coming in and gonna be coming off the bench more than likely, like he has been, it just convolutes things even more because that guy he's a good basketball player when he's healthy. I mean, he's one of 9 guys in the NBA to do the 90-50-40. I mean, he's a great basketball player, but it's like that was with Milwaukee. That was seems like years ago.
It feels like forever.
It does, doesn't it? And it's not. He ain't going to be that player here. He's going to be, and he wanted to go to a contender like this, so he's understanding his role. But at the same time, it hurts guys like anyone in that second unit. If it's going to be Derek White. Smart, it's going to hurt him a little bit because he's not going to run the ball out there a bunch when Brogdon's out there. And so it's really tough to I mean, Horford's my favorite guy just because they need his size. But when it comes to the guards, like I'm not even super high on Tatum. But on a 2-game slate, it's not like I'm not fading him. I'd rather favor Harden over Tatum. It's just I'm not super high on him. I think I'd rather go Brown.
And it's still early in the day too. Like I'm hoping we'll get some more news just for a lot of these teams, just to try to get a little bit more insight into how we want to play it. And that's kind of focusing on the strategy of it. When it comes to NBA DFS, most of you guys already know those last minute, like 6:30 to 7 decisions that you make, like right before a lock. Those are the decisions those are your money decisions where we hopefully have a little bit more news, a little bit more action items, and we can kind of act on some of this. With this guard situation, I don't think we're really going to know until we actually just watch them play and see what these rotations look like and see who's actually attacking for this team outside of the main 2 guys.
Yeah, I watched a lot of preseason and stuff, what they were doing and the way they were talking about it, what they plan on doing. But until we see some regular season games and how they exactly are going to attack it. I mean, because even when we talk about the Lakers, they talked about having Westbrook come off the bench even, and he's not going to be a Laker through the end of the year. No. We all know that. It's just when are they going to move him? But in terms of
prices are just soft enough where you have to consider it, where you're like, this guy could play just enough minutes where it could still make sense. So yeah, like the Celtics situation is one where you can definitely spread it out a little bit more. It looks like that's what ownership's looking like as well. Like it's definitely just more spread out. Like people aren't taking heavy stands on these guys just because it is pretty up in the air right now. So I don't think we're wrong there. And then like you said, when it comes to Lakers, everyone's loving Lonnie Walker today. I've heard his name come up multiple times, also for a mishap I made yesterday, but outside of that, I think people just love him. And then Kendrick Nunn is also another guy. Like these are like your cheap value plays that should get minutes today that everyone's looking to go a little heavy on. How are you treating the Lakers today? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about, in the first game with the value is not great, where you just don't know. But
This
Kendrick
is it.
Nunn they need scores, right? I mean, they just need scores. And Kendrick Nunn back in freaking Illinois days, man, was a scorer. Then with Miami, he was a scorer. Like the dude can put up points. I think the last game he came off the bench in preseason in 19 minutes, he's just scored just killed it. So I don't care if he comes off the bench. I don't care if he starts at min 3K. He's just one of those guys I think you got to play on a slate like this. You don't need 30 out of the dude. If he puts up 22, you're going to be crushing because I don't see a ton of other value out there. Like Lonnie Walker, same kind of thing. He's a scorer, but he's not going to have the ball in his hands, right? And same with Nunn. Nunn's a point guard, but he's not going to have the ball in his hands a ton. These guys are more, hey, finish at the hoop, be in the right spot. It's the ball's going to be in the hand of Westbrook and LeBron the majority of the time.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think this is where you're probably looking for your value. And if Golden State just absolutely waxes them, those guys are still going to be on the court, man. They're not going to be on the court.
Yeah, and I think that's where like guys like LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and maybe Westbrook, they get a little scarier because we're expecting the Golden State guys not to play a ton of minutes, and so overall the total and spread still looks like it's going to be pretty heavy for the Golden State Warriors, but those are definitely some concerns just across the board.
Yeah, this is the game that you're probably targeting your value from, though, and like everybody talks about setting up the DS and rules and whatnot like that. On a 2-game slate, I wouldn't really have, many rules on this, but
Yeah.
This is where, like, when it teams like this, if I was going to play on a 8-game slate, if I had LeBron James, I'm not going to have Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
If I played Brown, I'm probably not going to have Tatum on the bigger slates like that. So on a slate like this, when people ask about it, it's you don't need ceiling games out of these guys. You just need raw points on these 2-gamers. So,
So it's okay to have some of those combinations where you don't need to like rule yourself out.
So I don't want a ton of them, but I don't. Yeah, I think, like you said, rule yourself out. I think this hurts a lot of people when we go back in like NFL showdowns. You see these people doing 50 rules, and I'm like, you might as well. You're trying to build the optimal build, and then if you win, you're sharing with 7,000 people. It's like, but if you don't rule yourself out and you're adjusting projections to the ceiling on certain things, you're way higher likely of solo ship, and that's what you're looking for.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
And people talk about it here in NBA. Just you don't need a ton of rules, man. You're just looking for the best plays, and the only rules I ever do on most of these slates is just the high price guys on the same team. I don't want them together. That's generally where I look at. I don't do a ton. There might be like here and there, but for the most part, I'm doing all the stuff I need to do with adjusting the projections on 8 to 10 guys and giving them the ceiling projections that I want, and then adjusting ownership, because that's the big thing. Ownership is everything.
Yeah, definitely ownership is everything, probably more so than any other sport. It's just the thing to focus on. And same for me, like this is literally my DS situation. Of course, like I'll have more edits and changes later, which is another reason to watch the pre-lock show. But it's very, 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 very rare that you'll see me have a lot of rules and things of that sort. On occasion, I'll create one, but 9 times out of 10, like the rule that I was going to create, the DS only had in one situation anyway. So I was like, okay, I'll take that one situation and let the rest of it be fine. So it just kind of depends. So, okay, tell me if I'm crazy. with this thought, Keg. So we know the Golden State Warriors. We know they're going to be on some minute restrictions. The starters, we know they're going to be on some minute restrictions. So guys like Curry, Wiggins, Thompson, Green, are you Xing them out? Are you not going to play any
Oh
of
no,
them
not a chance. Because
today?
we know Steve Kerr has a history of doing whatever the hell he wants to do, whatever from what he says in the first place. So, there's certain coaches that will say things and you'll be like, no, 100% can trust them. Steve Kerr is not one of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to play how the game's going to dictate himself. Do I see them guys going out there playing 35 minutes? No, I don't. But they're generally, I'm just looking back and seeing what Clay averaged last year against the Lakers, and it was like 31 and a half minutes, right?
Yep.
Well, it's not like there's going to be a massive change here. Yeah, he might not go over 30, but he could still play 20, 29 minutes. And at the prices that they're priced at, they could still be in the optimal for sure. So
Yeah.
I'm not trying to limit those guys, especially price wise. Now, if I was going to limit any of them, again, I would look at, Steph just because of the price, right? That would be the only reason. But we all know Steph in 15 minutes can put up 45 if his three's flying, So it's one of those things where I'm not really worried about it because I think some people go a little crazy when we get news like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like it's a hard minutes cap. He's just basically saying they're not going to play their, maximum minutes they would in regular season because of conditioning. I don't see it as, I think it's like a 28 to 30 thing is how I see it. So, and at their prices, they can easily get there with what they are.
Yeah, I feel like it definitely limits their ceiling, but it doesn't eliminate their ceiling, like there's definitely still ways for them to get there, especially on a 2-gamer. If we were in a 5, 6, 7, 8 gamer or more, different. I'd be like, hell no, I'm not playing Golden State when they're on a 30-minute cap. And even in that situation, there's still a situation where they could make the nuts, but it's just a situation I normally try to avoid. But on a 2-gamer, we know the upside that these Golden State Warriors have in limited time. Even guys like Poole they've gone off in very few minutes. It's a situation I'm not going to avoid. And I was going to ask if I was crazy because that's exactly what I was going to say. And I thought you were about to laugh me off the pod. And I was a little nervous, but I think we're good.
No, but I think you got to look at it too is the NBA DFS community, just in DFS in general, gets sharper and sharper and sharper every year to the point where everyone has access to the same information. Everyone has access to, like they're all smart. They all know, they read the tea leaves and they're like, yeah, they're going to be a 30-minute cap. If you don't trust Curry and you think this game is going to be close, Curry's not going to have any ownership. He's the ultimate GPP play in terms of, leveraging the field if you don't trust it, but I don't think I'm going to do it. It's just, you have to look at things that way because it's like, you are not the only one that gets the information about what Kerr said about it. So it's like,
yeah,
you almost have to don't use the information the way you probably you could have 3 or 4 years ago, and more think, and it's like, if you think of it the other way and it's like, well, if the field is going to take this information and do the optimal thing, how can I leverage that information to leverage the field? So it's different. It's almost like it's a completely different game now, and you have to use that information to your advantage in different ways, not just take it for black and white value.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations where typically I would say I'm playing Curry, and that's just what I'm doing. It's still early in the day. Like I said before, I'm going to see how I feel. Like, again, I recommend everyone check into the pre-lock podcast because I'll have a pretty good grip on what I'm doing at that point. But as of right now, I'm leaning towards at least matching the field, like Father of Three recommended. We'll see if I go over. That's kind of my overall thoughts. But just for the general slate, Keg, like, who are your favorite plays? Like, I know we'll have our sheets ready later, but like, do you have favorite plays that might be like your least favorite guys you want to avoid? Any strong opinions on this slate at this point?
I think just first glance at it, because of how we talked about it, I don't see how I'm going to get away from Al Horford. I just don't. At his price, I know he's going to be super popular, but barring foul trouble, there's nobody on that roster that can even come close to that dude. Like to help to try to guard Embiid.
Yeah, like they
Like
need him. It's
they
pretty much what
have
it
to
comes
have him
to.
out there. Like Blake Griffin is not. I mean, no,
Blake
Blake,
Griffin.
he's dust. It's like he's gonna play 10 minutes a game. He's gonna, the only way he does something is if Horford gets in foul trouble, and then he is forced to be out there because he's really the only backup center that they have. I mean, Grant Williams he'll go out there and he'll play tough, but he's not gonna body and beat at all. Like he's just gonna get dominated. So first glance it's him, and then second glance is just none being men priced, where regardless if it's a competitive game or not, he's going to play minutes. So,
Yeah, for me, as soon as like someone starts to hit like 50-60% ownership, I start to look for ways to not play them. But on 2 game slates, I'm usually a lot more flexible to just kind of like eating some chalk, even more so than I normally would be. So
I think it's
I
for
get
me,
it.
it's dependent on the salary the guys are, right?
Yeah.
When we look at chalk that I'm going to eat or not, if there's going to be a guy that's a stud on a slate, I don't tend to want to eat that chalk. I might match the field or go a little bit higher.
Hmm.
But if we get value pieces that I think are going to play the minutes that have a good chance of getting me there, I would rather get those value pieces right and then kind of mix and match your studs around them. They just have way less opportunity to fail.
Yeah, I get that. Any strong opinions on like guys like LeBron or AD?
Not really. I mean, we know. I, I'm curious, how much is LeBron going to push early in the season to try to
Yeah.
just get that record out of the way in case an injury or something happens? I know that's kind of, conspiracy or however you want to read it, but I mean, he wants it, I mean, that record is massive,
Yeah, I think
that's the
those
record
like those theories and like scenario building type of things are, and especially when it comes to digging deeper into like rotations and how you foresee those going. That's really what you have to do when it comes to, like early season NBA DFS, because we don't know exactly what those rotations are going to look like yet. It's okay to get a little creative and see like, oh, I can see this happening, and so maybe spin it that way, just because we don't have as much data to base it off of yet. So I see nothing wrong with that at all.
no, that's just, again, that's the only reason I lean that way is just he's going to be more aggressive, right? So,
Mhm.
but it's tough, AD is AD. Is he going to last all season or not? I mean,
Yeah.
what he could have been as a player if he wasn't so soft.
If only. Like I remember when he was actually good. It's crazy.
Yeah, how many
Uh,
years ago was that?
I know. Hey, well, that's pretty much all we have for you. It's just a 2 gamer, so nothing too crazy to dig into. Like I mentioned earlier, the pre-lock show will be at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. We'll have more information. I'll know how I'm playing this slate, or at least an idea of it, and then definitely can go over some of your questions and concern later as well. Yeah, over under on Anthony Davis to the locker room. Really, most of the guys on this slate, like that's freaking
Most
ridiculous.
people you
Anything you
set
want
it
to
at
say,
like a
Keg?
half, but I think with him you got to set it at 1.5.
Yeah,
So,
like it's freaking ridiculous.
it-
Anything else you want to add, Keg, before we go our separate ways for a little bit?
no, just if you are not a DFS Army member, make sure you sign up and check out everything we have to offer. I mean, I put out that list of stuff that we have. It's a massive amount of content that we do behind the paywall for NBA, and Bob and I've had pretty good success over the years of hitting tournaments, and we do cash games and everything else. So just make sure you check it out, and you can hear Bob and his Up to Lock show, and hopefully we can help you make a little bit of money.
Yeah, guys, also don't forget to like and subscribe. Really trying to boost those numbers, trying to get to 10,000 subscribers here before the end of the year. So if you guys can help us out with that, that'd be awesome. And outside of that, look forward to seeing you guys later. Have a good one. Peace.